Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the NBA Front Office Show. As always, plenty to talk about going on around the world of the NBA. Yes, it's the middle of July, but we still have plenty of drama out there around the league, plenty of transactions to get into. So we're going to dive into that. And also, we're going to have some scheduled nonsense at the end of the show today. So stick around for that as well. But first, Keith, what's that sound? What I hear? I hear something.
Could that be the Harden horns?
It's the Harden horns.
There it is.
James
the Harden horns.
Harden. The trade talks continue. Keith, we got an update today on James Harden and the trade front. Philadelphia 76ers ultimately going to move him. There was a little bit that came out yesterday as well. What's the latest?
Yeah, so if we go back to yesterday, Daryl Morey I believe it was an interview. I don't think it was a press conference, but he basically said, yeah, James Harden prefers to be traded, and we're trying to honor that. But he said, let me get the exact quote here. The reality is, if we do look at a trade, it's going to be for one of two things. It's either going to be for a player who continues to help us be right there, like we were last year, up 3-2 on one of the best teams in the East in the Celtics. If we don't get a very good player or something we can turn into a very good player, then we're just not going to do it. And if James were to turn his mind around, we would all be thrilled. But at this moment, he does prefer to be traded, and we are attempting to honor that. So that was on the 97.5, the Fanatic in Philadelphia. So Daryl Morey basically owning the trade request. And then news came out today in a good long piece from Jake Fisher that Harden is, he still wants traded, but if he isn't, he plans to report to training camp with the Sixers and will continue to push for a trade to the Clippers, and that's where he wants to be. It's the Clippers are, I think it's singularly focused on playing for the Clippers, so that's kind of where we're at with the James Harden updates for now.
Okay, so does that take a little bit out of the bite out of his trade request? Or the fact that he's on a 1-year deal, does that still? I mean, if he really wants to go nuclear, he says, "I'm just not going to show up if you don't trade me." He's not going down that path, but there's still, I think, a decent amount of pressure on the Philadelphia 76ers to get something done, right?
Yeah, I think so. I think part of it with Harden too is we've seen what happens when he shows up and he doesn't want to be somewhere. We saw it with the Rockets and with the Nets. He showed up and quite frankly didn't play very hard and didn't look overly engaged and like he didn't really care. So Philly's running a risk, right? He may pull that again, and it's that becomes hard, right? Because if he just doesn't show up, you do what you did with Simmons, you fine him and you do all the things you need to do there and you go down that process. If he does show up and he's not playing hard, how can you necessarily prove it?
How do you quantify that?
Yeah, right. We can all see it. It's one of those things where I don't know how to describe it, but when you see it, like we can all see it with that. So that's where, that's to me, that's almost worse, right? Than just not showing up at all. So it's gonna be something we'll monitor here. My guess is this is much like we've talked about with Damian Lillard. It's just about getting to that right level of package. Now, what I was told in Las Vegas is, and nothing has changed, obviously, in the week we've been home here, but it was that Philly is in a spot where they're asking for a lot back. They obviously want a big return. And Morey basically said that, right? We want a player or players who can keep us near the top of the conference. But they're also asking for that within guys who are on either really good deals or they are on expiring deals because they have some plan brewing to have cap space around Joel Embiid next summer because that's part of why they didn't extend Tyrese Maxey. They're looking to keep him on that $13 million cap hold. Then have that relatively small amount. Would he agree to a new deal next summer? But you'd hold it till you did everything else, and then you'd sign him and go over the cap. So that means you can't really take money back in a trade this offseason. So I'm not quite sure how those two things don't really work together.
Yeah.
Right. So that makes it really hard. And then when you say, well, I want to be with the Clippers, then if you're another team, I was like, yeah, we think we can make James Harden work. Now are you like, is it really gonna, or is it gonna be, no, I still want to be with the Clippers? Where do we go? So that's where, all these, I want to be traded, but I want to be traded to exactly one team. It can kind of backfire and slow things way, way down, as we've seen with Damian Lillard.
Yeah, I mean, that is to thread that needle, right? Of we need a player that can help us win right now, that doesn't have long-term salary, and that plays for the Clippers currently. I mean,
Yeah.
what is that trade, right?
Yeah.
Especially if, like what we've heard, the Clippers, they're not, well, what's being put out there is they're not all that interested in James Harden.
Sure.
And of course, even if they're insanely interested in James Harden, if they are chomping at the bit to get James Harden on their team, they still want to put out there that we're not that interested.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? If we don't have to trade for him because they don't want to overpay or anything. But under the parameters that we're laying out here, I don't know that the trade is there with the Clippers, unless it's what, man, I guess, maybe.
Yeah, and that was one of the reports that had been floated around out there, that he was a sticking point
Yeah.
in the deal. And you kind of get it from the Clippers standpoint of James Harden's now a guy who I think we can feel confident he's probably going to miss 20, 30 games a year. Kawhi and Paul George, if they only miss 20 or 30 games this season, you'd feel pretty good about it if you were the Clippers. So you can't, it's not like you can just say, all right, here's 3 or 4 guys for James
Yeah.
Harden, because you're in a spot with this. I reported in my Summer League notebook that Philly and Miami is in the same boat to some extent. They're a little stuck with filling out their rosters fully, because they know we may be doing a multiplayer trade here, and then what do we do? Especially on the Philly side, there was thoughts of geez, you could have maybe got this guy, could have maybe got that guy, and
Yeah.
it's but if we do a 3 for 1 or a 4 for 2 kind of trade, and we end up +2 in players, we need to have roster spots for those guys. Otherwise, you signed a guy, and now it's like, hey, I know we signed you,
Yeah.
but we're gonna waive you. That doesn't go over well. That's never a good thing. So it just gets kind of messy. So I'm very curious to see how this ultimately plays out. My guess is it's like I always say, the Clippers offer will improve enough. Philly will say, all right, you know what, Norman Powell's got long-term money, but pretty good guy. We can take him back, and we'll figure it out, and it'll get done the way Harden wants it to get done. But it may take a while to get there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, it may. And this is why what you're talking about, the roster crunch situation, this is why it's much easier to do something like this July 2nd, July 1st, right? That it is once you've made most of your roster moves here, July 19th as we record this. But
Also, can I say one thing, because it's related to that, is nobody's sitting on cap space anymore. I put this out there yesterday. There's like, the Pistons have a comically small amount, which just they didn't sign anybody that they could have just given it to. So that's one other thing with them. But but the Pacers are like the only team, and they have like less than 2 million left in cap space. Now there's a couple teams that could potentially generate a good chunk of cap space, but you're not sitting on a team with 30-40 million where it's like, all right, you don't really want Norman Powell, but we'll take him on, and you route one of the picks to us instead, and we'll eat the contract or whatever. Those teams are basically off the board. There's nobody just sitting there with, please, send us you're tired, you're wretched, you're poor, and we'll make it all work. Like, nobody's sitting there with the Statue of Liberty arms open in New York Harbor.
So that's a great, I love the historical reference there. That's fantastic.
I did that for you.
I loved it. But like under the new CBA, like the Miles Turner situation from last year, it's not happening now because the Pacers sat on cap space forever that they were going to have to spend no matter what. And then they used that to give Miles Turner a big bump in his last season's salary because that money was spent anyway. They had to use it to reach the salary floor. And then as a result, got a cheaper Miles Turner contract for this coming league season and the next league season, which was brilliant by them, by the way. But now that you have to be there at the start of the season, you have to be at that salary floor. Opportunities like that, and like what you're talking about here with the James Harden situation, they don't exist anymore because there aren't going to be teams with cap space because they're having to spend that money earlier.
And we'll see if teams, as everybody kind of gets comfortable in this new CBA world, maybe teams will say, well, I can let it drag out to the end of July, beginning part of August, and then I can kind of jump in there if this kind of deal pops up later. And now we are kind of seeing these things. I don't want to say every year, but it's at least like semi-regularly that somebody is on the trade market deeper into the summer.
Mm-hmm.
Last year was Donovan Mitchell. That dragged out quite a while. Kyrie Irving, when he got traded to the Celtics, that was an August trade. That went down, and then obviously had some time added on to it after the Cavs were like, Isaiah Thomas doesn't look healthy. We need to think about this deal. But now we're starting to see these things that they're not. It used to be end of summer league was like me and you staring at each other like, all right, what are we gonna talk about? Because there's
And we're
nothing going
done.
on. And
Yep.
yeah, and then all right, I'll see you in September. Now at least things do kind of pull along a little bit,
Mm-hmm.
but yeah, we're in a little bit of a different spot. So we'll see. Maybe next year one of these teams finds themselves, hey, we're sitting on 60 million in cap space, and you know what, we'll save 30 million of it because there's something will materialize between now and the start of the season. But for the most part, these teams were they took care of business early and got things done, and everybody's already over the floor already. So it's just a different world we're living in.
Let me ask you this: why doesn't Miami, even if it's just to help create some leverage, call up Philly and say, "Hey, do you want what we're offering for Dame
Yeah,
for James Harden?" I know I'd rather have Dame right between
yeah,
the two,
that's
and then
why.
the contracts are very. You could argue Damian Lillard's the length of his contract might be less appealing actually than James Harden's contract. I think you make a really strong argument for that, but I mean, there's two, high scoring guards that are out there, and Miami's got a contract offer or got an offer that it could be on the table. And if Portland says that's not enough, what's to prevent Pat Riley from calling up Daryl Morey and saying, "Hey, what do you think?"
Yeah, and I get where you're saying, just from a leverage kind of play. I don't know
Sure.
that James Harden exactly screams heat culture and hard
Very
work
true.
and all that stuff
Very
like that.
true.
And that's not to like, and I'm not picking on James Harden. I
No.
think vast majority of his career, he has played very hard, and he's had a great career. No matter. Hey,
Mhm.
I know some people bristle at the idea of in the well reported stories of James Harden left the strip club at 6 a.m., slept for an hour, went to shoot around, and then dropped 50 that night.
Yeah.
Some guys are just that way. I mean, MJ was that way. Like he could stay out all night, golf all day, and then go kill you on the court that night later. So that's just some guys are built that way. But hey, it's I don't know. I'd maybe be a slightly bit terrified of James Harden and Miami all the time. Like that's a little worrisome. Not that James
He would
Harden in
have a lot of
LA
fun.
is all that much better. Yeah, I mean, watch him land in one of those spots and rip off an MVP season because it's like James Harden wins MVP on 2 hours of sleep a night, and
Right?
is these stripper fueled rampages through the league, and it's like, all right, why not? But yeah, I don't know. I think a lot of it ultimately with him, his value is just not that high because he's older, he's on an expiring contract. He is showing very real signs of slipping in his game. You saw that at points last year, even if I thought he was still an all-star level guy. So I think you are a little bit worried about, is this going to work? Is where I think with Damian Lillard, you can maybe feel a little bit more confident of, all right, we'll still pull this off with him for at least 2 or 3 really good years left in his career.
Keith, I didn't realize this. This has to be our last front office show because I don't think we are ever reaching the peak, the pinnacle again of James Harden's stripper fueled
Fueled
rampage.
rampage. Yeah, hey, why not? Right? I mean, I don't know. It's July 19th. I'm running out of things to say.
All right, let's get into some actual stuff that went down in terms of moves that were made. The Spurs decided to waive Lamar Stevens, and the Raptors waived Joe Wieskamp. This is obviously right, not championship deciding moves or anything like
Sure.
that, but this is the kind of stuff that you're going to have going on now, especially as teams start to look to get their house in order ahead of training camp is a few months away and they start to cut down to the roster and make some decisions and things of that nature. So that you're going to start to see some little things like this here and there.
Yeah, that's exactly it. And with the Spurs, it's really more about roster spots than
Yep.
anything else. They're nowhere near the luxury tax line, so it's definitely not about that. It's not about creating cap space. They've used up all their cap space now. This was really about, we don't have a roster spot for this guy. Let's cut him loose. Let him go catch on with another team and go. Lamar Stevens really is not bad. He had moments for the Cavs last year and the year before. So he's somebody I think could
Mm-hmm.
catch on somewhere, maybe, at least back end of the roster, maybe even work his way into a rotation. So that's kind of part one of that is there. He did get 400,000 guaranteed. How he landed with the Spurs, just in case people forgot, he was part of the Max Strus sign and trade. The Heat sent Max Strus out. The Cavs sent Jetty Osman and Lamar Stevens to the Spurs. So
Mm-hmm.
speaking of eating contracts early, those were two that the Spurs took on early, and they got a couple
Yep.
draft picks for doing so. And then Joe Wieskamp, former Spur, he was with the Raptors. He got waived. Again, same thing. Contract was coming up on its guarantee date. And the Raptors were in a spot where, all right, we're just gonna move on here. We'll free up the roster spot. They're about $5 million under the tax line too. So for them, it was starting to get a little close. So they'll probably, my guess is either they like to bring a bunch of guys to training camp on partially guaranteed deals and let them fight it out. So that's probably what they'll do again. That's kind of how Wieskamp got there in the first place, because he was part of one of those groups. So we'll see. And your old friend Svi Mikhailuk did that a couple years ago,
Yep.
where he played his way into a roster spot. So it's probably what the Raptors will do again. And whoever is the best of the group will get the roster spot. The other guys will either go to the G League or move on somewhere else.
Yeah. Yep. And as I think you noted, because we talk about James Harden, we talk about Damian Lillard, Pascal Siakam is the other name that's out there, but I believe this was in your notebook that the Raptors are kind of getting a reputation around the league as the team that dangles players out there and then pulls them back and isn't really going to move. So that'll be another thing to keep an eye on as the Raptors kind of make little moves like this. Do they ultimately do something with Siakam and move him, or does it become that situation again where, like we've heard, like we talked about last offseason, we probably talked about it the offseason before, where they've got players they can move and, oh, are they going to do it? Are they going to? And then they don't wind up doing anything with it.
Yeah, it's either going to be like they keep these guys and it's a slow exodus, which we saw,
Mm-hmm.
right? We saw Kyle Lowry go, we saw Fred VanVleet go, and now will it be, Siakam and Anunoby, those kind of things. And what you can't do is it's fine to keep guys and then just kind of let them leave. Sometimes that's better than making a trade and taking on a bunch of salary. But I think what gets too much is when good players are leaving for nothing. Then all of a sudden it's like, why did we not trade this guy and at least get something before he left? That's where you're going to be very, very careful in those situations. So we'll see. And I think, Masai Ujiri is just he's a tough guy to deal with. Same with his kind of lieutenant there, Bobby Webster. Those two guys, like they drive hard bargains, and it's not they're not. It's not that they're doing anything wrong. They just value their guys, and they want to get a good deal for their players, and that makes it a little bit tough at times.
All right, let's talk about the Oklahoma City Thunder, who was one of my favorite teams to watch last season. They were a blast. They played hard every single game. And so Mark Daigneault, let's start there. He gets a contract extension. They're getting Chet Holmgren back, which their big hole on that team was at the center position. I'm excited for this team for next year, and I thought Daigneault did a fantastic job coaching them. So this is a very well-deserved extension for him.
Yeah, I completely agree. They run some of the best stuff
Yeah.
in the league. And, I tend to, I don't know why I do this, but I call it running stuff for offense and then running schemes for defense. I'm not sure why. That's just how my
Stuff and
brain
schemes.
works. But but they really do. And as their talent gets better as far as bringing in more talent, or the talent they have improves and matures, that stuff they run is going to only look even better. So they're really in a great spot for where they're going. Now the challenge is, so as a reminder to everybody, you can carry now 21 players on your offseason roster. It used to be 20 under the new CBA. It's up to 21 because what the NBA did was when they added the third two-way spot, they didn't just take that out of the overall thing at 20, which is what they did initially when they added the two-way spots. It was, hey, you can bring up to 17 guys on standard contracts, or I'm sorry, 18 guys on standard and
Plus the
two
three.
ways. Now what it is you can still bring the 18 guys on standard, and then you can have up to three two ways and 21 total. It all counts. So I've seen a lot of stuff where people like Keontae Johnson, who signed a two-way with the Thunder after being drafted in the second round. I've seen people, well, he doesn't count because he's a two-way. No, it counts. It all counts to 21. As we record this on July 19th at about 2:30 in the afternoon, they are at 21 total players. So Jack White, who is a two-way guy with the Nuggets, who they've reportedly are going to sign, they can't sign him right now. It's not to say that they won't or anything is going on with that. They're just sitting on 21 total players, mostly because of some of the deals they jumped in. That's how they got. So where they're sitting today, they're on 20 standard contracts.
Yeah, I was going to say, these aren't two ways.
No, these are not
That's
two
the
ways. They have
problem.
the one guy on the two-way. 20 standard deals. That needs to be down to 15. Now, it doesn't need to get down to 15 until you get to the start of the regular season. There's a couple, I think, easy waivers made in there because they're veteran guys like Rudy Gay, Victor Oladipo, contracts they ate in order to get an asset out of eating those deals. But then you get into a lot more complicated situations for this Thunder team. And what I talked to two different teams this morning, just was checking in on a couple other things. And then you get talking about other stuff. Independently, both of them brought up, hey, what's OKC going to do? Like what are you hearing? What do you think? Who are they going to cut? And it was one of them said, yeah, we're all kind of watching because they're probably going to cut a guy or two who's nobody's going to swing the title, but should be on a roster, and a guy or two who other teams, may look to claim or may say, hey, rather than cut that guy, let's see if we can do a trade or something like that. So it's a really tricky spot that they're in.
So who are the guys that you're looking at their roster? Who are the guys that you see that they could be in danger? I mean, like Isaiah Joe is a non-guaranteed, but he shot the hell out of the ball last season.
Yeah.
Is that one of the names?
I think he's a lock to stay.
Okay.
So I kind of, as these moves come in, I do my own projections and do this. So these are the 5 guys. I have them projected a wave. I may be off on 1 or 2. We'll see. Rudy Gay, Victor Oladipo. Those are the easy ones.
Yeah.
I think there's a chance they may cut Ty Washington. Just they have so many guards. Like I just don't see it. Right? You've already got SGA. You've got Giddey. You have Isaiah Joe. You signed Vasily Micic, who's coming over from Europe. You have Kasam Wallace. So you're really in a spot where it's like, do you need him? So we'll see. Then now, so those are kind of 2 easy ones, and then Washington, we'll see. Then where it gets tricky is of this group of players, Davis Bertans, Aaron Wiggins, Trey Mann, Usman Garuba, and Jeremiah Robinson Earl. You got to cut the 3 or 2 guys out of that group. Like, that's not easy, right?
Those are good players.
Those guys are good. Yeah. So that's going to be the tricky spot. For now, I plugged it in as Bertans and Robinson Earl, but it could go any number of ways. And let me be very clear, too. I'm using the term cut. They could trade one of those guys. Challenge, though, with a trade is roster spots are starting to dry up around the league as well. So that's your other problem is, you could maybe trade Trey Mann and get, a minor asset for him, but you got to find somewhere that can fit in his salary and then give him a roster spot. Otherwise, they're right in the same spot you were. But that's the tricky thing for the Thunder right now. It's something they're really going to have to figure out. Now, I will say probably always better to be in this spot than be like, and we only have 5 good players, right? Yeah. That's not great place to be in, but it is still something, worth monitoring here. And these are the kind of things, we'll be watching over the next few weeks, because generally teams don't like to carry a bunch of guys into training camp that they don't intend to roster. They try to resolve these things ahead of the training camp process starting up.
Well, there's certainly going to be something to keep an eye on. And like you said, teams around the NBA are noticing this and they're getting ready to pounce. So if you look, any team that has an open roster spot could very well jump on any of these players that eventually get cut free. Other news we've got, the Suns are going to create a G League team. Finally.
Again. Yeah. Yeah. They had one for a little while, the Northern Arizona Suns.
And then they sold it, as I recall, didn't they?
Yeah, he sold it. Yes, he absolutely did. They were known for the Suns rarely filled both two-way spots under Robert Sarver, and the Northern Arizona team carried the bare minimum of 9 players most of the time they existed under him. So, yeah, not great. But Matt Ishbia, he was on a local Arizona radio station, and they said, hey, one of the questions is, a lot of people are like, we don't have a G League team. What's going on with that? And Matt Ishbia's response was, let's give it a week or 2, and then we'll see how you guys feel about that. So I think he's basically saying we're going to get a G League team. That'll be all 30. Now we'll have 30 of them. There'll actually be 32 total G League teams because we still have G League Ignite, which is obviously like the minor league, bring in guys straight from high school team. And then we have the Mexico City team, the Capitans, who are there as well. So, so we're moving into this Portland's G League team, which everybody thought Portland was going to be the final holdout because under Neil O'Shea and others, they were like, we don't need one. We don't want one. We can develop our guys better here in-house with us and sending them to the G League. I wonder if as he moved out and then ownership change with Jody Allen taking over from her late brother, if Adam Silver, because we know he wanted a full 30-team G League, if he maybe put a little pressure on. But the Rip City Remix, they're going to be called. They start this coming season. And then the Suns, my guess is it's probably too late for them to start play this year, but probably the year after that, we'll see the Suns have a G League team. And my other guess is if it goes the way these things are starting to go regularly, it'll be somewhere close by. Most of these teams are trying to bring their G League team fairly close by just because it makes it easier to shuttle players back and forth between the two leagues.
What should that team's name be? This in Phoenix, in that market, the Mercury is already taken. Phoenix Rising is a thing. Of course, you've got the Diamondbacks. You've got the Arizona Cardinals.
Could do. What if you did something like the, I don't know, Arizona Cacti or something?
The Cacti. Yeah, right.
It was just did you ever play the Final Fantasy video games?
Not like religiously, like a lot of people did, but I'm familiar with them to a degree.
Yeah, there was a desert bad guy you could fight, and I think they were called Cactar, and they so they looked like humanoid cactuses. So you could do something that's like that, like a cactus, like dribbling a ball. But what could be funny? What if the ball was flat because like it popped on the spikes of the cactus? Like that would be fun.
Oh, okay. I like that. Let me throw this one out there for alliteration sake. There is an area called Higley that's in Arizona. What if they went with the Higley Haboobs?
I don't know what that is.
You don't know what a haboob is? It's a giant dust storm. From having lived there for a number of years, it's a giant. In fact, they just had one there the other day. That would be fun to say, and would make some sense for the area. But I don't think they will really go with that because most people around the country would say, "What is a haboob?" Look it up. It's actually pretty
exactly
crazy.
it. Yeah. And do you remember the old G League teams? This is, and we're maybe dipping into scheduled nonsense here, but when they first started, they were like the Rim Rockers and the Low Gators and like all
it was like slam ball names.
Yeah, they were crazy names back in the day, and then and now they're like things like the Celtics and Lakers, and
South
Clippers,
Bay Lakers, and stuff
come
like
on,
that.
that's like the main Red Claws. Like they never should have changed it.
Yeah,
like, that was fun. It was a lobster dribbling a basketball with a claw somehow.
Come on.
I don't know how that works, but yeah, it should have stayed the Red Claws. That's when I'm given power over the NBA. All G League teams have to have a fun, silly regional name. They can't just be named after the NBA team.
And if you don't come up with something, you will be named via Mad Libs. And whatever you get.
Mad Libs done by children no older than the age of 7.
Yes.
So if you end up like the Fart Monkeys, you're the Fart Monkeys, and that's it.
What a show today. We got James Harden, Stripper Field Rampage, and the Fart Monkeys. All right. All right, let's talk a little bit about Anthony Davis. He is expected to extend with the Lakers. This is Dave McMenamin was talking on Zach Lowe's podcast the other day and said from people he's talked to, they do expect him to extend. That would give him 5 years under contract, including this current or upcoming season, however you want to look at the 2023-2024 season. But he could sign a 3-year extension of about $167 million. August 4th, he'll be eligible to do that. And the expectation is that he will. Doesn't mean it's going to happen right away, but sounds like they're of like mind, AD and the Lakers, in terms of coming to terms on an extension.
Yeah, a little cap quirk here, CBA quirk. Anthony Davis's current deal includes an ETO instead of a player option. And when it's an ETO, which stands for early termination option, functionally in almost every way, they're exactly the same. But where they differ is in an ETO, if you decline the ETO, you can't necessarily sign for more money than what the ETO is worth. So that's where it gets very, very kind of tricky off of those there, which is why sometimes people avoid them and they don't want them. They would rather have a player option. So, but it's he's going to get paid basically what he would have got paid otherwise. But this is why often you'll hear a lot of times guys declined a player option. They added 4 years onto their deal. He'll only probably likely do a 3-year extension.
Yeah, right. That's what we'll see there with Anthony Davis, and so he'd be essentially picking up the ETO. He'd be locking in for that year and then adding 3 years on top of that.
Yep, that's what we would see. That's exactly it.
Okay, the Bulls reportedly interested in Christian Wood. This is from Dan Wojcicki of the LA Times. I had heard this about a week ago or so. It's kind of buzzing around there, especially as that Lonzo Ball DPE stuff was coming through, the disabled player exception. And so now the Bulls they've got a little over 10 million with that DPE, but we had a conversation about this, Keith, that they're unlikely to use all of it. But they could still spend more than the teams like my Lakers that have a veteran minimum to use. They could still outbid those teams if they decide, hey, Christian Wood's probably the best on the market right now. Let's throw this at him and at least add him into the fold.
Yeah, and with a disabled player exception, you can sign a free agent or you could trade for a player, but the big key is it has to be a 1-year deal. The intent of it is it gives you some level to replace the player you lost. That's really what the thought is. The thought is not to get a guy and then have him for multiple years. Now, what you could do with Christian Wood in this case is, let's say the Bulls got to a position where, and it's a little over 10 million, but let's say they gave him 10 million. What they could do is at the end of the year, they would have his non-bird rights and they could offer him, a 20% bump off of that. So that would bring him up to what, 12 million in the next year. And you can kind of play the game that way a little bit with that. So that could be something. On court, yeah, it makes some sense. They could use another front court guy with some scoring punch. Right now you have Vucevic and Drummond, and then Pat Williams is kind of your only other guy. So you could get Wood in there as another bigger player, fit in. Probably my guess is takes most of Drummond's minutes. I don't think he would start. I think he probably comes off the bench, but you could do some stuff with him. Their challenge though for Chicago is right now they are only, by my count, about 3 million below the tax line. That is functionally been a hard cap for Reinsdorf for years. So I don't know that he's going to be willing to necessarily go into the luxury tax, with this. So that could limit how much they pay. But there's nothing to say they couldn't always make another move to shed a little bit of salary and create a little bit more wiggle room under there. And, maybe not the full 10 million, but, maybe they give him 8 or 9 million. And that's, at this point, if you're Christian Wood, if you could get that, that's probably not the worst idea. I tend to think he'd be better off for his career in totality. Take a minimum, but in a really great spot where you can prove you can still really get it done. You can play, and then you can be in a place where you can, rebuild your value and get back onto the market and sign those big contracts after that. But, hey, if you want to get it now and you feel like the Bulls are a good spot, yeah, why not?
Keith, did you see the quote that was floating around from Dan Wojcicki's piece about Christian Wood?
I didn't.
Let me read it to you. This is an NBA source talking to Dan Wojcicki, said about Christian Wood maybe winding up with the Lakers, said, if LeBron can get him to toe the line, it cements LeBron as the greatest player of all time. That's how hard it is.
Oh, yeah, that's not great.
That's rough. That's rough.
I think that feels a little bit hyperbolic.
Sure.
I don't think Christian Wood's quite that level of, he's not Dennis Rodman. Like, let's be clear. But yeah, he's had some issues some places. And when it looks like things are going right for him, they tend to only go right for so long, and then he hits some kind of bump in the road. So yeah, but that's the kind of place where I think it would make sense, right? Go to LA. You can really actually play a role there. You probably play, 15, 20, 25 minutes a night, probably more on the nights when like AD is out or sitting or whatever. You can really kind of just be like, all right, go do what you do. All right, go score 30 points and, keep us in a game and those kind of things. But yeah, we're getting down to it now. I mean, there's not a lot of money left to spend, and it starts to become a lot about fit more than anything else.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right. Let's talk about scheduled nonsense. I just realized I need like a sound effect or an intro or something for scheduled nonsense. I'll need to build something for that. Maybe while you're on vacation next week, which I'm still going to have a few shows out. We got some stuff we'll piece together, but Keith is going to be on vacation next week. You'll be out in the middle of the ocean on a cruise ship having a good time, but
completely disconnected. I will not be dialing in from cruise ship Wi-Fi if there's a trade or anything like that. It'll be we will catch back up on that when I get home, and you'll get all my thoughts then. It's it's funny day on the old Fantasy Focus football and baseball podcast. They would do it was like scheduled nonsense. I forget what they called it, but it was always at the end of the show. If they did it, and they would play this thing, it was like warning, nothing but nonsense from here on out. And it was great. So you knew all right, I'm done. I don't want to listen to whatever this foolishness says. But often it was usually the best part of the show. So I always listened.
Well, you're setting the bar very high for this segment. Then this is going to be the best part of the show. But no, what I want to talk about before you go on your cruise. It's coming out while you're on the cruise. Disney's Haunted Mansion. It's caught my attention, and because there was the one that was back in the early 2000s with Eddie Murphy. It was not good, and so that's got my expectations very low. I've watched some of the trailers, and I'm kind of talking myself into this to the point where I'm going, okay, it's PG-13. She turned 7 yesterday. Can my 7-year-old handle this, or will there be a few too many kind of jump scary moments that'll get to her? Because I'm kind of getting to a point where I'm like, I may actually want to go see this thing.
I'm sure she could probably handle it. My guess is any of the stuff that is jokey would probably go over her head, right?
Yeah.
Disney's usually pretty good about that. But it might be one of those ones that if you're in a nice theater and you lift the arm seat up and let her snuggle in for the scarier moments, you probably pull that off. But it does look kind of funny. What is funny, the State Farm commercials where they did is one of the sponsored tie-ins, and it's Jake with oh my gosh, Rosario Dawson is in it, right?
Oh yeah.
And she's like, what could we do about this? And then at one point he's like, run. And then they start running out. So it's kind of funny. But I don't think it looks terrible. There's a chance. So full disclosure, we're going on a Disney cruise. They generally play their stuff.
Oh, you might. I forgot about that. You may be able to see it.
Yeah, we might be able to pick it up and see it for free. And no, definitely, or I shouldn't say definitely, but I'm really hopeful Indiana Jones is playing on there because I'm not hearing good things. And I don't really want to pay for it, so I'm kind of excited to be able to.
Really, I heard some pretty good things on Indiana Jones.
You? Yeah, I didn't hear great stuff. So we'll see. Okay. So I'll give you a review when I get back and let you know because fairly certain we'll be able to see that. And it sounds so stupid because I'm on a cruise ship, but that's one of my favorite things to do
is watch movies.
Just in general, one of my favorite things to do is go to the movies because it's a chance for a couple hours to just turn everything off in my world. And that's why I would never ever want to be a prime NBA newsbreaker because I just can't do that.
Multiple phones and all that.
Nope, that's not for me. I want to be able to turn all that stuff off, go watch a movie for a couple hours, and not have to wait till it comes out, watch it at home, and pause it every 15, 20 minutes to go do return a text or a call.
Right.
Yeah, I don't want to do that. I want to go sit and watch a movie and be entertained. So I'm excited. It's gonna be great.
That's part of the appeal of the cruise to you is you just go up. I'm in the middle of the ocean.
Yep.
But I can't do anything about it. Sorry, phone. Yep. I'm not going to pay any attention to you.
I'm going to old school it all through ESPN on the TV, and
there you go.
I will watch the bottom line to see all right, well, what happened, and then I'll remember that you'd miss your score, or you'd miss.
And then you got to wait for it to re-air half hour later, hour later, whatever. Yep.
Yeah, I mean, it would be and if it was in August, you'd have NFL preseason games, soccer games, and then baseball scores, and it'd be man, I just wanted to see my one score, and it's going to be 30 minutes before we'd go, and I'd be getting yelled at because my mom would be we have to leave. What are you doing? You're just still sitting there watching that stupid thing. So yeah, between that and old school Sports Center, I'm gonna old school it for a week.
now we live in a world where people are upset if we don't like segment the videos so they can
Yes.
jump to one
Yeah.
specific topic. It's at the bottom of the screen. We
That's
have the topics up. And if we don't
it.
actually like put in the link to it, people are upset. Back in my day when we had to walk uphill both ways in the snow to and from school, that was when we had to wait an extra hour just to catch the clip that we missed on SportsCenter to find out what the score of the game was. Oh, this
I'm gonna
generation,
give you
Keith, I'll tell you.
here. You want some prime nonsense that you just made me think of?
Yeah.
So my great grandmother, she's passed now, but she passed it. She was 102 when she passed, or allegedly 102. We don't exactly know because when she was born, there were not great records kept. But she would tell us all the time that where she lived in Maine, she she would tell us like I had to walk uphill both ways to school, and we always thought it was just her saying the thing that old grandmothers say. And then she would tell us, and we couldn't wait till the winter to come because then the pond would freeze over, and I could walk across the pond to the schoolhouse. And she would tell us all this stuff. So one day, me and my dad jumped in the car and drove up to her, like found like where she lived. The house was no longer there, but found like where she lived. Every word of it was true. So what it was there was a pond, one that like direct path over to where the schoolhouse was. So that was the one interesting thing. And why it was uphill both ways is you had to go up a hill, then down, and then up another hill to go into the thing. So for her coming home, you were going back up that other hill on the other way. So that was that or I guess up and then down was how it was. And then
Still.
so you had to go back up and down. Yep. So she was absolutely telling the truth, on that. So going to school every day for her. And she used to say, and they would send us home for lunch. And then like we found like all this old stuff that was like, yeah, they would send the kids home. They did not do lunch at the schoolhouse. So as you'd go home for lunch and help the family with whatever needed done, and then back to school for the afternoon. If you were good enough. Most of the boys did not go back in the afternoon because by then they were into farm chores and other stuff. So it was most of the girls who went back for the afternoon classes.
It was a different world. And Keith, you mentioned, walking across. Hey, let's get a bunch of kids to walk across the frozen pond on the way to school.
Yeah.
What could go wrong?
Well, after the first few, you're probably okay. It's
Sure.
it's just it's those first couple that fall in. It's like
So as long as you're not first, then
well, that's
okay.
why families had like 25 kids back then, right? Because you sacrificed a few to things like testing out the pond.
It's the opposite of being chased by a bear, where in that situation, you want to be the fastest one. You want to be in first. If you're crossing the pond, be last. Be the last person to go across. Let everybody else go first and let them figure out whether or not you can actually get out there, which just brings me back to the Mighty Ducks. Gordon Bombay, what were you thinking driving that limousine out on the ice? Man,
with a bunch of
dangerous
children
stuff.
out there. Yeah, bad news. Yeah.
Dangerous
But he
stuff.
knew, right? Didn't he say like I could
He said he knew.
or whatever?
Famous last words.
That's it. That's true. There was probably a version of that, right? Where it cracked and the limo fell through the ice or something happened. So yeah.
All right. I think that's enough nonsense for today. I think that's enough. But thank you, everybody, for joining us. Again, make sure you are subscribing to the NBA Front Office Show over on YouTube. Don't forget to follow us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you listen to podcasts as well. Till next time. See ya and stay safe.